Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to promote a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. Today, I'm joined by Jacob Luria, a Jefferson County Libertarian running for office this year. Now, Jacob is also the current campaigns director for the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Well, Jacob, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me.
I'm doing very well, Brandon. I hope you are well. And thank you for having me.
Well, Jacob, tell us a little bit about yourself. What should people know about your background?
So I have a background in theater. I grew up in New York, went to college way upstate in Oswego, New York, which probably no one in Colorado knows where that is. The same as, probably no one in New York knows what Morrison is or, Littleton, things like that. But it was a good experience. Theater was a lot of fun, and that's still what I do in my current day-to-day life. I work at a theater in Littleton, the Town Hall Arts Center, which is great. They're trying to really become a pillar of the community and do a lot of community events, not just theater, and bring people in. So it's a really wonderful thing. Through that has definitely taught me how to work with all different kinds of people and all different kinds of skill sets. A lot of touring shows came through my college that I worked with. And, you work with a lot of egos and a lot of drama in the theater, but ultimately it's to put together a goal that everyone can be proud of.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, well, a background in theater probably sets you up perfectly for politics, right?
Yeah, I'm not the only actor who became a politician. So, and I'm not even necessarily just talking about Ronald Reagan, although obviously Ronald Reagan is the most famous. But for any libertarians listening out there, Republicans who may know of Austin Peterson, he runs the Libertarian Republic. I actually supported him in 2016 when he ran for the presidential ticket. He has a background in theater, which when I found that out, I went, "No, that makes complete sense."
Well, very cool. Very cool. How long have you been out here in Colorado?
So on and off since 2013. I moved out here first in 2013 with my best friend from college, and then was home for a couple of years for some family stuff, moved back out here. And then I've been out here since then, late 2017, I think. And I was living in Glendale, Cherry Creek for a number of years, moved out to Golden last year, which I love. Golden is really just a great town, a great community, and the mountains are right there. I when I go out on my little balcony, I can just turn left and see the mountains, and I just never get sick of that.
Oh, it's great. I know we're so fortunate here in Colorado to have so many great like hiking trails and nature activities right outside our front doors.
Yeah,
So that's
it's a
awesome.
beautiful state. I worked at a company that did extended car warranties, and people would often call and say, "Oh, you're in Colorado. That's God's country, son." But I kind of understand what they mean. Sometimes when the light goes through the clouds in a certain way, or just the way the mountains look, whether you believe in God or you're a more spiritual person or whatever, it is a natural beauty that really can't be denied.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. We're a very special place here, and anything we can do to make it more free and make it that little bit of slice of heaven, that's what we're
Mhm.
all working towards, I think. So
Exactly.
how did you become a libertarian? What prompted you to kind of get politically active in this way?
Sure. So I was originally a Republican growing up in New York, which is, the New England Republicans are certainly different from, the Southeast Republicans, the Midwest Republicans, the California. Maybe they're a little more similar to the California Republicans, probably. Like no one really cared about gay marriage when that was a big issue in the country, in a lot of red states was not an issue in New York. New York Republicans have struggled in New York for so long that things like taxes, things like that were really the bigger issues. Social, more liberal issues. Like my father, for example, is not necessarily a real pro-life guy. He's not like a huge lover of abortion, but he's certainly not going to go out there and probably march for your life or something like that. So, that was kind of atmosphere I grew up in. And ultimately, a friend of mine, actually, who was a Ron Paul supporter when Ron Paul ran in 2008 and 2010, I was my friend in college, and I there are some stereotypes of libertarians, Democrats who are, you know, uh, you know, anti-police, and some of the things that some Democrats have adopted now, but more pro-liberty Democrats, blue dog Democrats kind of, and pot smoking Republicans. I kind of fell into the latter. I definitely smoked, and had an incident in Illinois back in early in my life, and it was kind of a weird angle where there were a lot of things of limited government that I supported, and the Republicans just didn't really support ending the drug war.
Hmm.
But eventually, I kind of realized that a lot of Republicans just didn't really support limited government in the way they said. Trump was elected in 2016. Ultimately, I did not vote for him in 2016. I'm as a libertarian, I'm not going to say who I voted for because it might get me thrown out of the party. Actually, I don't know if you remember Evan McMullen. He was the guy who was the CIA guy. That might be my biggest regret ever. Any libertarian who's listening, I'm really sorry for voting for a guy who was in the CIA. I completely 360 on my views on the intelligence agency. So, we all make mistakes, but Trump was elected, and then ultimately, the Republicans failed to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And I was actually looking for a little bit of time of facing a fine for not having insurance for about 3 to 4 months. And the fine was going to be $1,200, which was a very large amount of money. And I understand the want to help people. And I understand even the argument, although I don't think government provides the best services, of saying, hey, if a government wants to enter this competitive market and provide these services, I guess it's fine. But all of Medicare, all of Medicaid got thrown in the Affordable Care Act. All of a sudden, all these people who didn't qualified. And I worked for a company in New York who worked on the Affordable Care Act. And I can tell you how just atrocious it really was. And honestly, I hate to say this, but some of the atrociousness didn't just come from the government. Some of it came from the company. Of when you're a government, at least our government contracted company, we would go on the streets of Albany, New York, and find any person and hand them a paper and say, do you want to make $15 an hour? It's more money than you've ever made, or $13 an hour to be in the call center. And a lot of people just didn't really care about their jobs. Some of our upper management, it was all about keeping the contract instead of providing the service for people. And I worked a little bit in appeals, not so much talking to people in appeals, but working on the quality control. That was just those people were always getting screamed at. And some of it wasn't on them. Some of it was people who, we sent paperwork to for months. They never filled it out. And there is a timeline and a process. You don't just get insurance overnight. It takes about a month. And so all of a sudden you have these people whose parents are dying in the hospital or suffering in the hospital, and they can't even get the Affordable Care Act insurance because they haven't gone through, the paperwork and then sent it in. And then it takes weeks to a month. And I even spent a little time in the mailroom to help them out. It was just a big mess, but I wasn't even asking for Republicans to replace the Affordable Care Act. I really just wanted them to repeal it. And I even had friends in New York who were not Republicans who supported this, and they couldn't even do that. I mean, their whole focus was, well, we need to find something to replace this. You're the small government party. It's not your job to replace it. It's your job to repeal it. And we can find something better. Let states handle it. I mean, I will say, and I don't know about it enough, but generally the people I know who deal with the Colorado insurance are, generally decently happy with it. Romney Care went okay in Massachusetts for a little while. I think ultimately with these government programs, you always are going to have to rehash them. They're never going to work. And that's in the private sector too, with the free market. One thing does not work forever. It has to change.
Right.
But at least at a state level, there are less people. You still have the wide variety of resources from where the wealthier people in Colorado to help the lower income people. And I went to an event last night for Jefferson County of services that do disabilities, work with the elderly. And Jefferson County does give some money to this, but one of the councilmen stood up last night and he said, without the private charity, these organizations wouldn't exist. And that's what really propels these organizations, which is really great. So ultimately, when the Affordable Care Act was not repealed, and I was living in Colorado, and I actually went to get a new license. And, in Colorado, you can register to vote, you can change your party. And at that point, I said, you know what? Why not be a libertarian? Why not? It can't hurt things. And at that time, kind of being involved in the libertarian sphere, one thing voters may not be aware of is it does help the party to have registered voters. Republicans and Democrats at this point definitely play toward registering voters more for how it will look toward the upcoming election. But having registered voters helps with ballot access, national things. People may or may not realize this. Democrats and Republicans get taxpayer money. They get money from the federal government, and they have to maintain a certain registered voter. So the
Hmm.
libertarians would get that too. I would imagine we would probably forego that kind of funding and, use that for our own funding to say, hey, listen, we gave up the government funding. We don't believe in this. We now have achieved that rank. But, voting numbers do help. But ultimately, I didn't want to be a Thomas Massey style Republican because I love Thomas Massey, but it's him alone out in the field just marching and beating his drum. And he had people like Amash when he was in there. You have a Rand Paul or a Mike Lee, but they're so few in number. And I can't trust Republicans like Mitt Romney and others. And I know people in, more the moderate will, maybe they like Romney because they feel like he is willing to be more bipartisan, but it ultimately is selling out your principles. I think compromise
Right.
is fair. Politics does have to be compromised, but you have to come at the compromise from where your principles are. And I
Right.
think that will equal everyone leaving being a little happy and maybe a little sad at the same time. And I will come from everything from as small as a government perspective as possible. And I've already, being on the campaign trail, you see places where you're just like, yeah, okay, that's not my first priority. Like if there is money going to mental health services in Colorado, I would like to audit it. I want to know that everything is going toward, how it's supposed to. There's no corruption in it. But if we're talking about the services or money being spent in the Colorado government, maybe mental health is not the first thing you need to cut. That's
Sure.
something that may come later when you cut other things, charities take over and people see how good it is. But, like that's not going to be my first priority. But there's so much waste, like in the transportation services. We're going to supposedly try and build Colorado to be electric friendly. Our congressional candidate, Dan Ward, who's running in CD8, he is a professional licensed electrician, and he'll be the first one to tell you we do not have the infrastructure here in
Right.
Colorado.
Right.
So there are just other things that are a priority, other waste that's going on. Probably, and this probably won't win me friends in the state government, but I'm sure there are positions there that just don't need to exist.
Sure.
One thing I'll give him credit, our Jefferson County assessor, he is a Democrat. But the one thing I really liked that he said was, in my 4 years at this job, we are now running at a lower budget than what my predecessor had. And my plan is to keep doing the job with as little money as possible. I want to pay our
Awesome.
employees, but there's a lot of extraneous things we want to cut down. And you know what? Like, I like that. Like, I don't know if there's anyone running against him, but if there's not, it makes me more comfortable with saying, you know what? Okay, I want to reelect you,
Definitely.
So
Well, that's good. Yeah, good
yeah,
stewardship. That's what you want to see out of the public servants, that they're looking out for the public, not spending extra money, not trying to expand their authority. That's
exactly.
ultimately how we create a little bit more of a libertarian type of state, for sure. But yeah, Jacob, I think, you're talking about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, government-run health insurance, that over the last decade has definitely really woken a lot of people up, or,
Yeah.
caused them to really reconsider the role of the government in their lives. I know people, my parents, who lost the insurance they had, couldn't go to the doctor they had gone under this new scheme that they were kind of pushed into. So it affected a lot of people, and people who were apolitical, who didn't really care too much, saw this massive intrusion into our lives. So I think you're not alone there in terms of government-run healthcare. Really, that's enough to turn almost anybody into a libertarian, I think, or at least start questioning that motivations of the government. And
Yeah.
I really,
And
yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say on that note, Brianna Titone, who is the incumbent Democrat in 27 that I'm running, I had a town hall forum and she said, I believe in the same breath, said, I believe in competition, but we need single payer, universal government run healthcare.
Wow. Yeah,
No,
and
it's just
Titione
an irony.
also. Oh, definitely. And Titione in Arvada, I know, is pushing also for the single trash service, the city-run
Hmm.
trash service. So yeah, these people do probably don't understand economics, or that's the best case scenario. They don't really understand economics. They don't understand how competition drives down prices and provides better quality services and goods. But also, they probably have, on the flip side, want to control our society and control the people. And how much better would things be if everybody just did things my way? That's kind of the authoritarian perspective. I think that as a libertarian, we're able to offer a different perspective and say, no, it's up to you. It's your life. You mentioned moving to Colorado, and I think a lot of people who moved to Colorado came here for this new beginning, for this new freedom, to kind of start their lives over, leave the past behind. So it's kind of a
Absolutely.
perfect idea. You move to Colorado, become a libertarian, say, hey, let's try something new. Let's have this kind of Western frontier individualism ideals and
Yes.
move forward that way. So I guess, Jacob, for people who don't really, or for people who are unfamiliar with libertarianism or the Libertarian Party, I know you've been knocking doors. I know you've been interacting and talking to a lot of Democrats,
Hmm.
unaffiliateds, and Republicans. What's your sales pitch for libertarianism or the Libertarian Party in general? What's your little 30-second elevator pitch to go to somebody who doesn't know anything about the party? How do you explain libertarianism to them?
Sure. So ultimately, libertarianism is pro freedom and pro liberty. I'm telling people I'm trying to provide a good third alternative that is far from the partisan bickering of the Republicans and Democrats that we have. Because I've been to campaign rallies for both, and it is just, we need to get rid of these people. We need to get rid of these people. And maybe there's kind of an idea here and there. And I've had some good feedback on, some of my ideas, whether people disagreeing or people saying, oh, like nuclear. I've had some decent feedback on that. But, that's sort of the elevator pitch: is pro freedom, pro liberty. And I want to show that we have good candidates out there that are running with good ideas, that are not just running to just throw out the other person. Don't get me wrong. I would like to win, and I would like Mariana to be gone, and absolutely. But I would be doing this if the Republican was in there too, because my worry about 2022, honestly, in the midterms, is that in a lot of states and especially on a federal level, the Republicans will take power back and nothing will change at all.
Sure. Or it'll get worse.
Or it will get worse, which absolutely could happen.
Right. Or yeah,
Trump
that's a
printed a lot
great
of
point.
money.
Well, yeah, I like that. I like what you were saying. Colorado unaffiliateds are really the biggest voting bloc in the state. A lot of people are
Yes.
very independent minded. Whether you're a former New York Republican or a Southern Democrat, there's this kind of melting pot here of political ideas. So being able to present
Yes.
people with a third perspective and an alternative viewpoint, I think is very valuable. You're to people out there, you're not stuck being a Democrat, you're not stuck being a Republican, you're not stuck just voting on those and sacrificing your principles. So I think that's an
Yes.
awesome message, Jacob.
Yeah, Colorado is such a geographically diverse state. And because of that, it really does, instead of creating, I mean, there are political identities that are created, but there's so much more geographically cultural identities. Like plains farmers and mountain farmers are not the same people. And if you get over to Grand Junction, it is different. The mountains are different from, Boulder and Denver are two very different feels of cities. Larimer is very different from going all the way down to the sand dunes or going down to Colorado Springs where there is the Air Force Base. So it it has, I don't want to use the word force, but like nature sometimes in locations do force people to have to learn how to work together in different ways, like in Golden and stuff. I ask a lot of people, like, what are your issues this coming November? And surprisingly, there are more people than you think who said, I don't really necessarily have specific issues. Golden is it's a quiet community. It feels away from Denver, even though it's a half an hour there. I just want to keep the feeling that I have now. Like, I want to keep what Golden is. That's really it. And, you get some people who do have, they end up talking about inflation, or, you can engage them in issues, especially when they look at what you're running on. But there are a lot of people who are just like, prices are going up, but in my life in general, I am content in terms of like my position in life, or maybe how, my feelings of my family or my community. And I like that, and I need to keep it. And then
Nice.
also in Jefferson, we have a lot of schools shutting down, which is, I grew up in a place where there was a total of 7 schools, 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. And Jefferson has 16 elementary schools that are closing down because
Wow.
enrollment rates are failing, because
Interesting.
government schools are failing people's children. And that's not coming from me. That is coming from online comments and people who I have talked to who said, well, why do you think these schools' enrollment rates are going down? What happened over the past 2 years? That's from mothers. That's not from
Right.
me, who has no children.
Wow. Yeah, no, exactly. There's a lot going on, a lot of hot button issues. And
Yeah.
so Jacob, what specifically made you want to run for office? There's a lot you could do. You're already a busy guy, it sounds like, especially being a campaigns director for Libertarian Party. What prompted you to really take this challenge on of being a candidate yourself?
So ultimately, I was nominated at our state convention, and I was going to be on the ballot, and I was going to do a little campaigning, but there were some other priorities I wanted to have. But ultimately, I was thinking about it. I did also speak to my father, who's been in politics for a number of years in different ways. Excuse me. And he said, like, if you're going to run, do it for real. And he is right. I mean, I do believe that libertarians have the best ideas. And I think we need serious candidates who will go out there and knock doors and talk to people and say, this is what we have to offer. I don't know if it's for you. We hope it's for you. Let me try and convince you, and then see what happens this coming November. But honestly, I do theater. I do like to talk to people. I do like to go out. It's not really that nerve wracking for me to knock on doors. Honestly, as a volunteer, when I helped other campaigns, I found door knocking much harder than as a candidate, because when you're the candidate, you can say, it's me, these are my ideas. And there are a lot of people who said, wow, no one's just come to my door to introduce himself running for office. And I get that. In all my years of living, even as a libertarian, the libertarians haven't come and knock on my doors. And I get it. Like I'm trying to get around to a lot of people. I haven't hit every libertarian door in my district, even though there's not that many, because you do have your base that you're kind of counting on to support you, and you're trying to win over people who wouldn't normally vote for you. But even still, like, it's something I have the ability to do. It's something I think I would enjoy doing. And I just felt like, you know what? Give it 100%, because that's what we need. We need libertarians to give it 100% and see where we land. If we're doing, you know, sort of, excuse the language, but half-assed races, not giving it the time of day, having a libertarian on the ballot is good. It gives you a third option, but people do want to hear from you. People do want to know that we're a party who is, we've been around for 50 years. For those who don't know, we started our party in Colorado, I think somewhere between Larkspur and Colorado Springs. And it's time for us to really step up. And that's what there are a lot of young people in the country who are realizing around, between 25 and 35 are like, oh, we're adults now. It's our time and responsibility to actually step up and try and do something for our country and our communities. And that's,
Hmm.
figured I would just give it a shot and see where I land in November and see how many connect, and maybe we can gain more libertarians out of it. Maybe,
Nice.
hopefully, speaking as a campaigns director, we can get a little bit more funding. But I want Colorado to know, and the country to know, that we are serious. And there are a lot of things we're still working on, campaign strategies that have to be, kept tight to the chest. But I think we
Sure.
might surprise people this coming November. I'm hoping that we will surprise people. And I think if Colorado specifically has the kind of November that I'm hoping for, it could very well make national media attention. And in some regards, it already has, actually. Our Senate candidate was brought up on Sean Hannity when he interviewed Joe O'Dea. So, and Sean Hannity actually got some decent flack from that, because there are a lot of Republicans in Colorado that don't think Joe O'Dea is really a conservative. And for those who want a moderate person, I will, who may be listening to this, I'll just say this about Joe O'Dea and about Colorado politics, and people who aren't active just may not know. Iowa is known for having a caucus because it's the first primary election that happens. It's nationwide, but they're not the only ones. We have a caucus system. The way to affect your party is you show up at the caucus, you try and make the ballot. And if there are more than one candidate in your race, you have your primary race. Now, we do have open primaries for certain parties, but the important thing to know about people like Joe O'Dea or some of the other Republican candidates, not all of them, but certainly a number of them, they did not go to the assembly, plead their case, and make the ballot by vote. They paid. I mean, I think Joe O'Dea spent $120,000 to pay enough people to go around and get signatures from him. And that is fine. If Joe O'Dea wants to be above party politics, He can, but he wasn't above party politics enough to get those signatures to be on the Republican ballot and now collect all the Republican money and collect $10 million. And Michael Bennet has collected, $18 million. And I suppose at least you could say, oh, Bennet is a party person. Like, he he fundraises for his party. Like, in terms of a fundraiser, he's great. I don't particularly like Michael Bennet. His cannabis views are actually pretty decent, but other than that, not great. We bought a 1-day fishing license to get an ad of him fly fishing in Chaffee County. But my point is, and when you're considering these people is, if you're a hardened party person, probably nothing I say is going to turn you. But if you are looking for something different, if you're looking to give America a different path, all I can say is I think we can all tell things are changing in America. There is a new chapter that is going to be written in American history starting soon. And what the libertarians want to give you is freedom and liberty. That's the chapter that we want to write. Liberty 2.0. A freer,
Nice.
more prosperous America. And people like Joe O'Dea are, not going to do it. People like Michael Bennet has been in there, is not going to do it. You need someone new. And you may not agree with every platform we have, but what I want you to think of is what single issues you can work on with libertarians, and to let you know that we will work on you with that issue. If you are anti-war, we will fight the forever wars. If you are anti-police state, we will continue to work on that. We don't want people's cars to be stolen in Colorado. We don't want people to get shot and killed in downtown Denver. But we want some accountability at the same time. When Denver police officers are shooting into a crowd, a man threw his gun away, which is, I get it, not the safest thing. Like if there's a round in the chamber that hits the ground, it could easily go off. But the police shot 5 people, which is not great. And at the same time, we have the highest rate of catalytic converters being stolen. Like, we need the police or law enforcement to focus on that stuff and let free people be free people.
Oh, definitely. Definitely, Jacob. Love it. Lots of great information there. And I think you provide a really nice vision for people out there who are looking for the alternative, who are looking for a different perspective and are looking for something to change a little bit. Like you said, there's a new generation of people becoming politically active, becoming politically aware, whether they're younger
Yes.
or they haven't been paying attention for years, and to have something they can look towards that's not the same old thing that's been hashed out over and over again is pretty cool. It's pretty neat to see this happening. So
Yes, and
yeah,
we
well,
are the
yeah,
youngest political party in America. There are more registered young. We are, don't have the largest registered, but we have more registered people under 40 years old than the Republicans and Democrats do.
wow, interesting. That's pretty exciting. Well, tell us a little bit about your district. Tell us the House district you're running in, and then the state legislature. Where is that located here in Colorado?
Sure. So House District 27 is definitely one of the districts, like many, that got radically changed with our redistricting. There was a bipartisan council, as I think how they portrayed it, to redo the lines. So District 27 used to be, for those who know Colorado decently well, used to be about 3/4 of Arvada. So Arvada is kind of this like bubble and then sticks out like this. So 27 was like most of that, what you could call like a strip. It is now about maybe half of that strip, 3/4, and then goes all the way down to Golden, all the way out to not quite Idaho Springs, and then all the way up to Coal Creek.
Oh,
With
so
Golden and Arvada obviously being the largest, population centers.
okay, great. And then so yeah, I mean, if so, this office in the state legislature, you'd be a House member, you'd be able to influence policy, introduce legislation. Have you thought about what kind of legislation you'd like to introduce as a state representative?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think now this is sort of on the assumption of, only a few libertarians get elected, or maybe I'm the only one, but I think because of the want for bipartisanship, I think I would have a real easier way of compromise, because each side is going to want my vote. In all legislatures, you have something what's called a whip, a party whip. That's someone who goes to all the members of your party and say, "Hey, we're doing this, you vote this way, or there's going to be problems. Maybe we primary you, maybe blah, blah, blah. There are no libertarian whips. Even if there are three of us, we're not going to have one of us bullying the other two into how to vote. We have a lot more leverage because we don't have this party apparatus coming down on us. If anything, because there are so few state elected libertarians, I would have the full backing of my party. And we are very open to candidates choosing their own way. There are principles we stand on, but each candidate and politician has to figure out how to navigate in their own political sphere. And so there are different issues. So on energy, I think what either side is there, I could help push a pro-nuclear Colorado. And I don't want to take your tax dollars and give them to big energy companies to build a big, power plant in Colorado. But I think we could look at doing things like removing burdens, any kind of little taxes that are getting put on. We could reduce those to allow a couple power plants to pop up. I mean, with 2 or 3 power plants, Colorado would not only have all the energy it would need, we could export energy to the rest of the states. One voter did bring up to me the price of, nuclear energy in terms of, I think, and he was talking about building the nuclear power plants and maintaining them, are higher than what you see with gas and nuclear. It's higher than what you see with solar and wind on a level where the windmills are and the solar panels are. But if you look at how these are built, like Africa is being strip mined dry to create the batteries for solar panels. So it may be sustainable where you have the solar panel, but it's certainly not necessarily sustainable where you're digging the raw resources from them. And like everything with competition, this will go down. And I'm not looking to ban things. If you're a fracking worker, I'm not looking to ban fracking. I do think, people don't know this, but fracking is safer than, oil pipelines. Granted, you can't put natural gas in a car. But I want Colorado to have as many forms of energy as possible, which will, because of competition, drive prices down. And I think if you had cheaper energy, like if anything, if you have cheaper products, everything tends to flourish because then you have more money for other stuff. And granted, low energy costs will not inherently bring your rent down right away, but all of these things will scale on top of each other. But it will be much easier to afford everything else if you're not paying $100, $150, $300 a month for heat. I am like we run our air conditioner here all the time because we have no air conditioning in our apartment. It only cools one room. But it's going to go up when heat goes up. So that is my first priority because I honestly think energy is something that I can bully either Republicans or Democrats. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into that state legislature and I'm going to bully the other parties into standing up for the things they say they believe in. So when Democrats want to reform police, I'm going to make sure that they don't give kickbacks to police unions or maybe have little rules in there that say like, oh, citizens of Denver can't carry guns, but law enforcement can, So, and with Republicans, if it's taxes, like in my district, we have at least 3 or 4 mobile home communities. And running, I've really realized how much those citizens are suffering. You pay rent on the land that you have for this mobile home, even though many mobile homes can't really be picked up and moved. And actually, in a recent Colorado law, it made it illegal for a lot of people to move out of their mobile homes, even if it was on wheels. It was basically they tried to do a rent control bill. The rent control didn't go through, but they made all these other infrastructure requirements. And then what happened is people across the state got kicked out because there's only so much land in these mobile home units. And to build new water infrastructure and stuff, you had to get rid of people. So people lost their homes. And then they pay property taxes on the mobile home, which is the most offensive thing I've seen. So I want to help toward rent, but the first thing we could do is just nix property taxes for those people. It's not going to solve your rising rent. I absolutely acknowledge that. But the government controls your property taxes. And if Republicans somehow gain control of Colorado in a red wave and I am in there with them, then I'm going to bully Republicans and how much they say they want to lower taxes and that this is a tax that could instantly help people right now. And if it's the Democrats, bully them into saying, you love you say you want to help poor people and you're all for the lower class, the workers and all this. That's BS. If you don't support something like this, how can you say that you support people at the lower end of the spectrum? You know, I'm
Nice.
I'm sure there are people who are in mobile homes who have a higher income than I necessarily think. People want to live all styles of lives. I know people who want less space, but like to go out and buy fancy things. But I would doubt a lot of millionaires live in mobile homes, and I don't think you should be taxing any of those people, but this seems like a real easy thing. You
Right.
do have those weird millionaires who say, tax me more. You don't have people in mobile homes saying they want their taxes raised. They need financial relief. And that is one thing the government could absolutely do for them.
That's awesome, Jacob. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Having an independent voice in the state legislature, having a libertarian there could hold both parties accountable, especially if it was really tight in terms of the two-party control. Having a
Yes.
libertarian as a swing vote can kind of help push either of those issues. But I think you're really hitting the nail on the head with cost of living. I think, energy, like you said, plays into that. Taxes plays into that. Government policies very much contribute to how much everything
Yes.
costs in our normal day-to-day life. And I think that's a message that's more important than ever. People are being strained at the gas pump, their electric bills, their cost of food. I mean, everything is going up so much, except their paychecks. So, really running on that message of saying, hey, I'm here to help you. I understand the economics that you're going through, and let's see what we can do. I think in Colorado, so often, so many of our politicians are these out of touch millionaires who can't really sympathize or empathize with the common person. Somebody like a Jared Polis, who was born with a silver spoon. He's extremely wealthy, doesn't even have to think about paying his bills or how he's going to make
Mm-hmm.
ends meet every month. Same with Michael Bennett, born into an establishment, Washington, D.C. family, highly politically connected with lots and lots of money, going to Ivy League schools.
Yep.
These people, they don't understand the constituents like in your community who live in mobile homes, who work minimum wage jobs, who are struggling to make their ends meet. So I think libertarians in general can really offer that, grassroots kind of populist message. Say, hey, we're here for the common person. We're not here for these Washington, D.C. special interest groups. We're not multimillionaires. We are going through the same things that all the other people here in our community are going through. And we have solutions. We all know the problems,
Yeah.
but we can offer actual solutions to how we can lower our costs, make our lives a little bit better, make things better for our kids' schools, and just help out the community.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I will, because I would be a third party person in the state legislature, they are going, there are going to be exceptions to this, but in a lot of ways, the Republicans and Democrats will have to court my vote. And with that, we'll be able to become compromise of supporting things that I want. And I'm not really I'm not doing this for my own ego where I want to sponsor all the bills that I want to put up. If getting something that I want means that a Republican or Democrat gets to be the sponsor and gets the glory for it, I really don't care. I really just I want to be left alone. I want citizens to be a little bit more left alone. And if I can
Right.
help do that for you, that's ultimately my goal.
Awesome. Well, definitely. I think you'd make a huge impact in Colorado politics if you do win. And even just getting out there, knocking on doors and being a part of the community is going to make an impact, especially in your district. So, I mean, what differentiates you primarily from your opponents, would you say? I know we've touched on this quite a bit, but is there
Mhm.
anything that stands out more than others, an issue or an idea that kind of really is the distinction between the Democrats and the Republicans and you?
I would say nuclear power for sure. I don't know really any other candidates. I don't really know a lot of candidates across America who are really running on nuclear energy. I'm sure there's some. I don't really know any national one, big national ones. I don't know anyone else in Colorado. I know when I had a town hall forum, I brought up nuclear, and it actually caused the incumbent Democrat to tweet at me to say that she doesn't inherently oppose nuclear. These are just her concerns. So obviously, that was a pain point that I was able to prick there. And the Republican is not talking about that whatsoever. And I would also, the Republicans have gotten on board with the school choice, which is something libertarians have supported for decades. I mean, we can find libertarian articles going back to the 80s talking about this issue. I have magazines from the 90s. I would say be careful only in the regard of Republicans kind of have this, and this has happened in Colorado where, they take back control. They seem to see like they fix some issues and then they just completely ignore everything again. When I met my Republican counterpart in this district, Lynn Embrick, very nice woman, but she just started a school last year, a year and a half ago, and which is great. I have a lot of respect for that, but I think she needs to focus on that. And honestly, I know I'm running as try and be a politician, but I think the best way to change is doing things like that in your community. If you have a restaurant or a bar or a type of business that you think you could make a more community oriented place, you should do that. That's my suggestion to ultimately fix communities. And the good thing about running it is it has introduced me to so many more people in my district and my community, and it's given me ways that I think I can continue to be involved and help out no matter really what happens, ultimately with the race. What I have been kind of disappointed in my Republican counterpart is now maybe she has her own campaign strategy. I've been to a lot of events. I've occasionally seen the Democrat, haven't seen the Republican at all. And that just kind of tells me that she doesn't really have the time for this job. She can't the event last night was bipartisan people across the county. She couldn't make time for that. And it wasn't an event that I sought out. I was invited as a candidate to be there. I was given a table to talk to voters and no Republican. So how much do the
Wow.
Republicans really care for you? Or do they just really care about beating the Democrats? And that's my problem with it all, is every 4 to 8 years, or even in the midterms, it's these people are terrible. They're sucking. You just need to trust us again. And the Republican Party has been around since a little bit before Lincoln, or, realistically, just a little hair before Lincoln. It's changed a lot. And I'll tell people it's not a small government party. It didn't start that way. There may be some small government people in it. And I know Reagan kind of pushed the small government thing. Calvin Coolidge was the real small government Republican president. But they're just, and that's not going to be that libertarians are going to strip away every form of government. I mean, our governor candidate running right now, his catchphrase is government at the right size, or something like that. He used to be a Democrat. He's a private school teacher. He really wants to reform schools. He's not looking to necessarily just rip all of your education dollars out of it. He wants to audit it. He wants to look at it and make sure the money is spent correctly. And he wants to reduce the amount of bureaucrats in the system so that there's more money. Now, one thing I could do that everywhere I go, I'm telling people this, and I even brought this up to my Democratic counterpart, and she did not deny it. We collect all this money for tax revenue from cannabis. It is being stored in the Treasury Department just there. It sits there. It is not getting spent in schools. Originally, the concern was that the feds would come in and shut it down if the money was being spent, because on a federal level, when cannabis is still illegal, you can't spend it on anything. But it's just been left there. I don't know how much is in there. I would imagine there's billions of dollars. I have heard 40 billion. I don't, that wasn't from anyone in the Treasury Department, so I don't know. But the Senate candidate we ran in 2018 worked for the Treasury Department, and he told everyone that. And it is mind-boggling.
Wow.
So ultimately, we need to be giving this money. We can put the legislature, we could put the governor, everyone. It's a great media release for all these politicians, honestly. You write checks to these schools, and you go to these schools and you hand them to kids, and you hand them to teachers, and you hand them to principals, and you say, here's 20 grand, here's 100 grand for your school, whatever. And then you look at the federal government and you say, please, I dare you to come and arrest our politicians for funding schools. This is the hard ball that politicians need to play, and they don't. Anyways, sorry, that's a whole nother rant.
No, that's great, Jacob. Well, I do think you have a lot to offer the voters in Jefferson County and in House District 27. Definitely a new perspective, an alternative viewpoint. And, for people who are interested, how can they support your campaign?
So my website is pretty easy. It's jake4office.com, the number 4, not spelled out, jake4office.com. And I would go there. I have linked my Facebook and Twitter, so if that's something you like to follow, please follow me there. I have a volunteer and a donate button. If you would like to help me, help volunteer, help me knock on some doors, I would really appreciate that. If you happen to, have like a print shop or something, and you're willing to print some stuff for me for free, I would also really appreciate that, all within the bounds of the campaign finance laws, of course, absolutely. And there's also a donate button there. For anyone who doesn't know, if you donate under $20 to a campaign through the entire election cycle, we don't have to report your name to the Secretary of State. So anyone who's thinking, man, I kind of like what you're saying, but I'm worried about my party knowing that I donated to you, $5 or $10 is an enormous amount of help. The maximum limit is 400. So if you're looking for that, I have had a couple people who have donated that already. That's been really wonderful and helpful. I was able to get a marketing campaign up, doing some, was able to print door hangers, doing some other things. And I have about $1,000 left that I would like to increase for sure. I think ultimately maybe $5,000 total would present me with a decent challenge. You know, I've been told by a Republican in this district, you have to have $100,000 to win. That is BS. You know, a good message and, connecting with voters is ultimately what's going to win. That's one thing Barack Obama's campaign showed us in early 2000 was if you knock on voters' doors and you actually show and they see that you actually care at least a little bit, even if it's to just not make their lives worse, that's great. So please, I would ask for any amount of money you might be willing to donate. I know times are a little tough. So, if it's the difference between paying your rent and donating to me, please obviously do not do that. Pay your bills, put that $5 away to save for your future, buy some gold, things like that. But if you have a little money to spare, I would definitely appreciate it. Again, jake4office.com.
Well, awesome, Jacob. Just one last question for you.
Of
What is
course.
your advice for Coloradans who want to make an impact in Colorado politics?
I would say just get involved. This is one thing that surprised me when I got involved. And it's at every political level, and not just politically, but in your community and in local soup kitchens or charities, anything like that. You'd be surprised how many people don't do it. You'd be surprised how few people really run these organizations, and any help you give is great, even if it's just on a Sunday of going to a soup kitchen and helping, or if it's like the Libertarian Party, we do road cleanups all over the place. You don't have to join us. Start your own road cleanup. You don't have to get involved in politics. If you are, though, wanting to get involved in politics and making a big difference, the Libertarian Party does not have the obstacles that the Republicans and the Democrats do. If you want your voice to be heard in our party, your voice will be heard.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jacob, for joining me today. I
Thanks,
wish you
Brandon.
luck on your campaign. And let me know anything I can do to help you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Take care.
Take it easy.